بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت السميع العليم، واجعل هذا العمل خالصا لوجهك الكريم. We begin in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad. This lecture is a continuation of a series on Imam al-Nawawi's Maqasid, which is translated and commented upon by Sheikh Nuh Hamim Kalla. We begin with the book of purification, at-Tahara, and this is the maqsad, the chapter on how do we prepare ourselves for prayer. So why do we find that a lot of the books of jurisprudence, of fiqh, start with chapter on purification? Because it is a prerequisite to the prayer, which is after the shahadatan, after entering Islam, the greatest pillar and the most important act that one does. And so being aware of how to prepare for it and be in a state of ritual purification, which is a condition of the salah. Without it, one's prayer would be invalid. The ulama begin with purification. So we're going to go through the meaning of purification, the types of water, types of filth. How do we purify things that have had filth on them? How the use of the miswak, minor and major ritual impurity, the difference between them. How does one remove that state of ritual impurity through ablutions or the ghusl? And then we'll end with topics on menstruation, postnatal bleeding, and then chronic annulment of ablution. So the Imam begins with by saying purification, tahara, in sacred law means lifting a state of ritual impurity, hadath in Arabic, or removing filth, which is najasa, or matters similar to these, such as the ghusl, purificatory baths, that is merely sunnah, or the renewing ablution, which is also a sunnah, where one is still in a state of ritual purity, but one is repeating it. So ما كان على صورته أو على هيئته. So this is purification, and this is what it is meant by it. Now, before we begin, we want to be aware that the rulings and the fiqh discussed here is based on the Shafi'i school of law, which, of course, relies on the Quran, the Sunnah, scholarly consensus, and reasoning by analogy. We'll be using, or rather, there are 5 sacred rulings in the law, and these rulings, so anything that you do, whether it's dunyawi or ukhrawi, whether it's to do with your ibadah or it's to do with your financial transactions or getting married or buying and selling, whatever it is, you'll find that it falls under one of 5 rulings. Either it is obligatory, wajib, recommended, mandub, unlawful, haram, offensive, makruh, or permissible, mubah. An example of obligatory, wajib, or rather the definition here is that something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the shara' has, sacred law has compelled. It is an injunction from Allah, amr min Allah, that one is compelled to do. If one performs it, one gains reward, and if one fails to perform that which is obligatory, then one incurs sin. And the example of this is prayer, for example, or fasting Ramadan, or paying the zakah, or performing the Hajj if one is able to do so. Those are obligatory things. And then we have the recommended, or the mandub, also known as the mustahab. You'll also hear it being called a sunnah in this specific sense, meaning recommended. And this is an act that a Muslim is encouraged to do, but is not obliged to do. So sadaqah, for example, if one has paid the zakah, one pays something over and above it, that's sadaqah. This is mandub. It's not obligatory. It's recommended. If one wants to recite Quran, a juz a day, that is a recommended act. If one wants to pray the sunnahs of Dhuhr and Maghrib, etc., the sunnah prayers, those are recommended, those are mandub. One gets reward by doing them, but does not incur sin, does not fall into error by not doing them. The unlawful, which is the haram, and the haram is an action that one is compelled by sacred law not to do. And if one does it, then one incurs sin. And an example of this is taking usury, riba, interest, that is haram, drinking alcohol, eating pork, etc. The thing about the haram, well, let's talk about this at the end. Offensive. Then we have the offensive, which is the makruh, and the makruh is something that you will not incur sin. It is not haram. You will not incur sin if you do it. But if you don't do it, then you will be rewarded. Then it is a good action. And this is important. So an example of this is israf fil wudu, is using too much water when you're performing wudu. Just keeping the tap on, throwing water everywhere and staying. This israf is makruh. It's offensive. You won't get any sin by doing it, but if you don't do it, if you conserve the water that you use, if you use a small amount, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to use a very small amount of water to actually do his ablution, perform his ablutions, and so this is from the Sunnah to not use a lot of water. So that's an example of something that's makruh. We have also the permissible, the mubah. The mubah is you neither incur sin nor do you get reward by doing it. Like what? Well, pretty much anything that you do, most things that you do, vast majority of actions performed by a person fall under the permissible. Okay, so for you to call up your friend and have a chat, it's mubah. For you to eat an apple, for you to walk from the sitting room to the kitchen, for you to travel to a neighboring town, if it's done to buy something, that's permissible. That's mubah if it's something that is permissible for you to buy. So that is mubah. Mubah is the widest and the biggest, the greatest number of actions fall under the mubah. Now, the thing about the mubah is that it can be changed into an action that is mustahab. You can actually gain reward by doing the mubah. How so? By doing it with a good intention. And so if you do For example, you want to go to sleep. Going to sleep is mubah. If you couple it with an intention before you go to sleep that you're going to sleep in order to strengthen yourself, in order to preserve the body that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you to take care of and to preserve it and to gain your strength in order that you may worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that sleep becomes a qurbah. It becomes an action via which you draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're going to eat that apple, okay, but your intention with that is to gain strength to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is something that is mustahab. If you're going to go out for a picnic with your family on the weekend, then let that be with a good intention, that you're there to, your intention to bring joy and happiness to your family, to your wife, to your children, and also for your own self, to as the ulama say, tarwih an-nafs, to relax the self, to allow it time to recuperate. We all need time to unwind, and it's a healthy thing to do every now and again in order to allow the self to re-energize and be prepared to get back in the thick of things, as it were. So these are the 5 sacred rulings, and in the Shafi'i madhab, it's these 5. The Ahnaf, they'll add another 2. They'll have the makruh, tahrimi, and the like, and then they have the fard and wajib. But in the Shafi'i school, we have none of that. We only have these 5. Okay, they don't differentiate between fard or wajib. They're all the same thing. If I say obligatory, wajib, fard, it's the same thing. If I say mandub or mustahab, sunnah, it's the same thing, and the like. Okay, and so now we want to go on to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is the meaning of purification. So we said lifting of a state of ritual impurity, removing of filth or matter similar to these, such as the sunnah ablutions and the bathing, the sunnahs of bathing. So, one would be obliged to bathe after falling into major ritual impurity. That's you're obliged to do that, but you are not obliged to, for example, perform the ghusl, the bath of Jumu'ah, of Friday prayers. That's a sunnah. Anyway, so the first thing we need to know is how do we purify ourselves? What is it that we use for purification? And purification, very simply, is only valid with water, okay? And specifically plain water. Now, what we mean by plain water, essentially water that comes from the heavens and comes out of the earth. Rainwater, that from snow, from hail, waters from the ground, from springs, from aquifers, from rivers and lakes, and the sea, water in the sea, salty or fresh. It's all considered, it's all valid for purification. Okay, so that's plain water, and what is excluded from that is one water that it's previously used for purification. And in the Shafi'i madhab, so this is important. So in the Shafi'i madhab, if you have let's say that you were to perform wudu, okay, you've performed your ablution, and that water that has fallen from that has fallen from your body during the ablution is collected. Let's say that you collect it in a bucket. You are not allowed to use that water again for purification. That water is called musta'mal, ma' musta'mal al-tahara. It in and of itself is pure. So, it's not najis or anything, but it's not purifying. You cannot use it to purify something else. Okay. You can't use it again for ghusl, can't use it again for wudu. Now, the reason for this, that the ulama mentioned, is because the wudu, when one performs wudu, as in ghusl, in the hadith, it is mentioned that the sins of a person that they leave with the water. So if one washes the arms during ablution, and the water drips off, comes off, and that water takes the sins of the arms and the hands away from it. When one washes the face, then the sins of the face, the eyes, and so on and so forth, and they are removed from that. And the same thing with the feet, and so on. And so the ulama say that that is a water that you should not use to purify again. The second type of water that you should not use is water that is changed. Okay. Now, what we mean by changed, we mean through its taste or color or odor, its smell. Okay. So much so that it's no longer really termed, it's not really called water. So, you put, let's say that you have take a cup and you put a tea bag in it, then you pour boiling water. At some point, that boiling water, as it is as the tea is infused with it, is no longer called water. You can ask someone, "What's this?" and they'll say, "Oh, this is tea." Okay, ask someone, "What's this?" "Oh, this is coffee." It's no longer called rose water or whatever. So water that has changed so much so that it's no longer no longer called water. Yes. So this is we said the changes color, taste, or odor through admixture, and so on and so forth. And this is. And this isn't water that has changed. We're not talking about that it's become impure. The water can itself be pure. So a cup of tea is pure. You drink it. It's not najasa, but it has changed. It's no longer plain water. And then impure water. You cannot purify with water that is najis. And what we mean by this is water that has that is less than 216 liters of water, but so it's less than 216 liters of water, and any impurity, any type of filth has fallen into it. Okay, a drop of Ajalakumullah urine, for example. Okay, if it's less than 216, even a drop, even if the water has in itself changed, even if you look at it and you couldn't tell, you ask someone, "What's this?" They'll say it's water. They couldn't tell whether there's any filth inside. Even if that's the case, if the amount of water is less than 216 liters, then it is considered filthy. Okay, it's impure, and you cannot use it to purify. Now, if the water is greater than if the amount of water is greater than 216 liters, then so 216 liters or more, it doesn't become impure with mere contact with filth. So let's take the example before. Let's say you have let's say you have 220 liters of water, okay? And the drop of urine falls into that water. That water is still considered pure, okay? Mere contact does not make the water impure. It will only become impure when it changes. In other words, its taste or color or smell changes. Okay? And so as soon as that change happens, then it's considered impure. If that change hasn't happened, so amount of water greater than 216 liters or greater, mere contact with filth doesn't make it impure, but if the amount of filth is so great that the water itself begins to change you. For example, you see standing water, and you go to it and you find it has feces or something inside, and the water itself has started to smell. Then it's not pure; it's impure water. However, if this water that has changed if the change disappears by itself after a while, okay, so you leave that standing water is a big barrel, more than 216, and it's had some filth inside. The smell has changed. It's got a funny smell, and you just leave it a few days, and you come back, or a week or something, come back, and the smell is gone. There's no change in color. It looks like plain water. Then it's fine. Okay, then you can use it. It's considered plain water. Additionally, if you add water to it, if this water that has changed, okay, due to it's impure, or water that has changed, if you add water to it, such that the change disappears, then it's again purifying. You can use it to purify things. So the reason why are we talking about 216 liters? It seems rather arbitrary. Well, these are conversions from the original units that the ulama use. Okay, so they'll use the word qullatayn. Okay, qullatayn in metric units is 216 liters, and this is the kind of the cutoff point between what they call al-ma' al-qalil wal-ma' al-kathir. A great deal of what is considered a lot of water, a great deal of water, which is 216 or more liters, or a small amount of water, which is less than 216. So just to give you an idea of where we got this from. There we go, to less than 216, becomes impure by mere contact with filth. More than 216, so it's more of water doesn't become impure by mere contact with filth. It must change at least one of the characteristics, odor, taste, or the color. So the question is now, well, we've talked about filth, okay, mere contact with filth. What is filth? What is, in the Shari'i sense, what is considered najasa? And najasa are seven types. So filth is either blood or pus. That's considered najis. Vomit, liquid intoxicants. So whether it's liquor or any products containing ethyl or methyl alcohol, since these are produced during wine fermentation. And this is different from other types of alcohol that are not produced by wine fermentation, and hence not considered filth. Now, one should point out that when it comes to perfumes, if one wants to remain on the safe side of things, that one should really one should avoid using perfumes with alcohol in them, with this type of, because a lot of perfumes will use the ethyl or methyl alcohol, some that is considered najis. However, you do find opinions in later Shafi'i ulama, I believe, including Imam al-Buti, Muhammad Sa'id Ramadan al-Buti. I think that they have a fatwa or a ruling saying that it may be permissible to use them. They say li'umum al-balwa, but it is always best to that opinion exists. So if you see people using perfumes and things that have ethyl alcohol in them, they might be taking that opinion. However, one should al-ahwat, the best is one for one. It's best that one avoids these things when one can. Then we have anything that exits from the front or rear private parts. Okay, exits meaning anything. Okay, other than sperm and female sexual fluid. Okay, we'll talk about exactly how those are defined in a moment, but anything else, so urine, feces, blood, anything that exits from those, from the front or rear private parts is considered najis. Pre-ejaculate fluid, in Arabic called medhi. So that would be considered najis as well. Okay, that's filth. 5, animate life that has died without being Islamically slaughtered, other than aquatic life. So other than fish or seafood, that's not considered najis. We can eat fish, it's not najis, it's tahir. We can eat seafood, at least if you're a Shafi'i. And so these are excluded. But any other animate life that has died without being slaughtered, that is not halal, has not been slaughtered Islamically, then it is considered najis. As well as, so animate life that has died without Islamic slaughtered, we said other than aquatic life, and also other than locusts. So locusts are not considered najis. Okay, in fact, it is permissible to eat them. Now, amphibians, the same thing. So aquatic life we're talking about, we're not talking about amphibians. So, a frog or something, or crocodile, would still be considered najis. That if a carcass of a crocodile or a dead frog is still considered najis. Then we have, and now of course, animate life. This excludes human beings. Okay, so a dead body, dead human body is not najis. Is not najis. 7, dog, swine, or their offspring. And what is meant by that is, should a dog or a pig, for example, mate with another animal, the offspring of that is also considered najis. Also considered najis. And this means... anything that, this also includes anything that comes off them. So their saliva is najis, their hair is najis. And any body part that's separated from a living being is considered najis. Okay, so that means that, like we said, dog hairs and hair from a cat, for example, that's considered najis. Now, except for that which it's permissible for us to eat, like the hair from a goat, for example, or the wool from a sheep. So the hair of animals that Muslims can eat after slaughtering, feathers, for example, from a bird, chicken, etc., they're considered pure. Now, important to note a couple of things. Wine is made pure if it turns to vinegar by itself. This is a process, and the hides of unslaughtered dead animals, if they're tanned, other than dogs and pigs. So let's say someone finds a dead a deer or something, and one takes it and tans the skin. Now, before the tanning process, that dead body is considered najis. After the tanning process, that after the removal of the blood, the urine, the fat, etc., the hair, after that tanning, it is considered pure. Now, how do we purify? So now we've figured out, we understand what filth is. How do we purify? How do we purify something from filth? Is it? And it's very simple. Whatever has been affected by filth. Okay, let's say the piece of clothing, the baby has urinated on it. You wash it 3 times. You wash it at least once with water. 3 times is recommended. So as long as the athar, the smell and the odor or the color, the effect of this has gone, and so whatever is. So 3 times is recommended, at least once is the bare minimum. And whatever is affected by the saliva of a dog or a pig, or the offspring, can only be purified through washing 7 times, one of which is with dirt. And the way this works is that you would take some dirt, get some water, make it muddy, clean the article of clothing, for example, once with that muddy water, for example, and then 6 other times you wash it with water. Okay, and we do this since it is specifically mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, something that is affected by the urine of an infant, a male infant that's had nothing but milk. So they haven't eaten anything, they haven't drunk anything but milk. Washing is not necessary. It can be purified by merely sprinkling water over the article of clothing, for example, or the carpet or whatever, until it covers the entire spot. That suffices. As soon as that infant starts eating or drinking other than milk, then its urine is treated like anything else. It is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have good oral hygiene, and specifically to use the siwak. And the siwak it's sunnah to use it whenever the smell of one's mouth has changed. There are specific times, such as after waking from sleep, before you pray. It's a sunnah. And so the best thing to use for a toothstick is oud al-arak, okay, which is a specific type of wood. I can't quite recall exactly the translation in English, but if I remember it, I'll mention it. But even a toothbrush, even a normal toothbrush that's used, that's considered a toothstick. That suffices. And brushing one's teeth and cleaning one's teeth, if one does that, then it is a sunnah. There is reward in it. and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that it is matharatun lil fam, mardatun lil rabb, that using the toothstick, cleaning one's teeth, it is a purification for one's mouth, and it is a means by earning the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is rather extraordinary, because if you think about it for a moment, this is the ultimate goal: earning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, earning the rida of Allah, and his rahmah, his mercy is so vast that us as pathetic creatures, using that miswak, something doesn't take any effort. It's something, in fact, it's a good thing. It's a pleasurable thing to do. It's something that one does, but it's part of the habits of a Muslim. That just by doing that, one can earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whosoever earns the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sa'id for eternity, has earned felicity and happiness for eternity. Subhanallah. So we know what kind of water we use. We figured out what is considered filth, what is najis, what is najasa, how do you purify articles from najasa. Now we want to talk about major and minor ritual impurity. In Arabic, al-hadath al-asghar, minor ritual impurity, and al-hadath al-akbar, major ritual impurity. Al-hadath al-asghar, the minor ritual impurity, that state is removed through ablution, which we'll talk about. But what is it that causes it? There are 4 causes, only 4, nothing else. The first is anything that exits from the front or rear private parts. And that means that includes urine, feces, gas, as a liquid, solid gas. Anything that exits from the front or rear private parts is a cause of minor ritual impurity. Now, this excludes something going in. So for example, someone, let's say a catheter going in, or a suppository, or something that something that enters does not cause minor ritual impurity. Something that exits does. The second is the loss of intellect through sleep or unconsciousness, insanity. If one has an operation and you're put under general anesthetic, or any, or insanity, etc. So this loss of the intellect is a means of, this is one of the causes of minor ritual impurity. Now, there are certain caveats to this. So when we say sleep, if one falls asleep when one is firmly seated on the ground, okay, so a surface that's firm enough such that it prevents, and you're sitting firmly on it, okay, sitting, not lying down, but sitting, such that it will prevent breaking wind, then, while seated on it asleep, then that sleep does not cause minor ritual impurity. So for, let's say, you're in the Haram, Mecca, and you've just, you've arrived in the middle of the night, and you go to sit down for a bit, and then you find that you've fallen asleep on the tile, on the marble, for example, and you're firmly seated. You haven't moved left or right. You haven't, and you've fallen asleep, you wake up, if you're still in a state of ritual purity, you have not lost that. Another example. Yeah, so when we say loss of intellect, it doesn't include being drowsy or daydreaming. Otherwise, most of us would be in a state of ritual impurity many times during the day. And drowsiness here means that what is this? Okay, what is the cutoff point between being drowsy and falling asleep? Drowsiness, that you can still hear the words of those present. So you can still hear the words, even if they're not comprehensible to you. That's drowsiness. You haven't actually fallen asleep. Okay. The third is contact between the skin of a man and that of a woman. Okay. Specifically here, so for example, a husband and a wife. Okay. Any non-mahram. Okay, skin of a man or a woman that's not a mahram. So this does not include your mother, your sister, your aunt, grandmother, etc. So in other words, when they're not legally permanently unmarriageable to you, okay, then any contact between that skin of a man and that of a woman causes minor ritual impurity. So here it's contact of a skin. So contact with hair, for example, the nail, that's not included in that. And when there is no barrier, so the skin to skin contact. So if the contact is through cloth, through clothing, then that is not what is meant by the contact that removes ritual purity. Okay, it has to be physical contact between the skin of a man and that of a woman that is not a mahram. Then finally, the touching of human private parts, the genital area, or the genitals or the anus, and specifically a touching with the palm or the inner surface, the palm, okay, or inner surface of the fingers. So it doesn't include the outer surface of the hand. Okay, it doesn't include any other parts of the body. Only the touching of the private parts of the palm or inner surface of the fingers. Doesn't include the tips of the fingers. Doesn't include the nails. When that happens, just by mere touching, then that's a cause of minor ritual impurity. Hadath asghar. So only those four. They're just these four. Ablution is not nullified by vomiting. It's not nullified by letting blood. It's not nullified by a nosebleed. It's not nullified by laughing during prayer. It's not nullified by eating camel meat. If it's not one of those four, it does not cause minor ritual impurity. Okay? The ablution is not nullified. Now, this is an important point. There is an axiom in the sacred law that certainty is not removed by doubt. If one is certain of something, الشك لا يقطع اليقين. اليقين لا يزول بالشك. Okay. If one is certain, so let's apply this ruling here when it comes to ablution. This is a very common question. There'll come a time where you think to yourself, wait, I'm not sure, have I done ablution or have I not? Do I have wudu or do I have not? Or have I not? or do I not? Did I go to the restroom perhaps after the wudu? Did I not? I'm not sure. The ruling here is that if you are certain that you have ablution, I'm certain I remember that I did wudu half an hour ago, but I'm not 100% sure if during that half an hour that my state of ablution is lifted. So I'm not sure, did I actually go to the bathroom or did I not? I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm absolutely certain that I made ablution half an hour ago. But I have shak, and shak meaning it's 50-50, might not. You should treat it as if you should go with the ruling that you still have ablution. Okay, you're in the Shara'i sense, you still have ablution. Okay, but if the opposite is true, if you're certain that you do not have ablution, okay, so for example, you're certain that you went to the bathroom an hour ago, okay, but you might have performed wudu, okay, you might have performed wudu, then you should do ablution. Okay, you do not have ablution, you need to perform wudu. Okay, so these are this is the basic idea. So let's talk about actions that are unlawful without ritual. In fact, well, yes, let's talk about this, and then we will end the session, the lesson lecture, and then we'll pick up next time. So actions are not okay. So if one has a state of ritual, minor ritual impurity, it's haram for you to perform the prayer. It's not lawful for you to perform salah, whether it's sunnah or fard. It's not permissible. It's haram to do tawaf around the Kaaba, because tawaf is essentially the prayer circumambulating the Kaaba is a state of prayer, except it's different because you're allowed to speak mubah things, whereas in prayer you're not. But it is kind of a state of prayer. You should be in a state of ritual purity. Now, this does not include the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. So let's say you're doing Umrah, you've done your tawaf, and your state of after you've finished your tawaf, you go to the restroom and come back. You do not have to be in ritual purity in order to do the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. Okay. I'm mentioning this because it comes, it's often they're done together, just to clear up any uncertainty there. So performing the prayers, circumambulate the tawaf, the Kaaba, and then 3, to touch or carry the Quran. You should not touch the mushaf at all. It should not be something, you should not even carry it. It shouldn't even be carried in a bag. If you have a bag and you want to carry the mushaf, or you have, it's a carrying case, you shouldn't even, you are not allowed to carry the Quran, even if it has a carrying case, even if it's in a bag, unless with one exception to this, that the mushaf is in a bag with other things. You've got the mushaf there, there's your laptop, there's a notebook, and your intention is to carry the bag with all its contents, not merely the mushaf, then that is permissible. Other than that, the Quran is very clear, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. The mushaf is not One cannot carry it unless one is in a state of ritual purity. For major impurity, which we'll talk about next time, these three, prayer, tawaf, touching, carrying the Quran, are included. In addition to the recitation of the Quran with the intention of worship, if one is in a state of major ritual impurity, we'll talk about what that means later, and also remaining in a mosque, okay? Staying in a mosque. If one is passing through, but one should avoid staying in a mosque and reciting the Quran. Here, we're talking about with the intention of worship, so this excludes with the intention of protection. So you're protecting yourself. You're reciting the Surah Al-Ikhlas, for example, Ayatul Kursi. So with the intention of warding off harm, for example, which is not specifically the intention. The intention here is not worship. Then that is permissible. So we will end here, inshallah. Next time we'll pick up. We will talk about. We'll continue. We'll talk about the other actions that are unlawful through without ritual purity, specifically regarding menstruation, postnatal bleeding, and then we'll move on to discuss the wudu. How does one perform ablution? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.